3811.
All right, let's get to this this collusion, this cabal of left-wing editorial pages, most of which are filled with Democrats. You know, I wonder where the New York Times comes down on attacking Trump with their new editorial page writer. The bigot, the racist. You know, I forget her name. Zhang is her name, Susan Zhang, something of that sort. And so, while we don't care what these editorial pages do, because most of them are liberal anyway, or kookier than that, it underscores a point that we've been talking about here, often and always. Let's see how Brian Stelter at CNN reports this. Brian Stelter, you know who he is. He's the little dwarf who has a weekend show that nobody watches, and but for me mentioning it, you wouldn't even know it exists. In fact, you wouldn't know he exists. Much like Don Lemon at night. Don Lemon at night. Ask 1,000 Americans who Don Lemon is, and 1,001 won't know who the hell he is. You get my point. And I'm a little angry with the president, quite frankly. I've said for a long time now that Don Lemon is low IQ. Don Lemon thinks that's a racist attack. It's not. Because I've said 1,000 times that Brian Stelter is low IQ and probably lower IQ than Don Lemon. But we're really talking about low numbers at this point, negative numbers. More than 100 newspapers will publish editorials decrying Trump's anti-press rhetoric. This is how Brian Stelter reports at CNN, the constipated news network, with no ratings. The dirty war on the free press must end. That's the idea behind an unusual editorial writing initiative that has enlisted scores of newspapers across the country. The Boston Globe, now that's pretty funny. The Boston Globe, left-wing radical kook newspaper, editorial board, kooks. I don't know if they're still owned by the New York Times Company or not. But Kennedy sycophants. The Boston Globe has been contacting newspaper editorial boards and proposing a coordinated response to President Trump's escalating enemy of the people rhetoric. And I'm sure they did the same against Obama when they learned that Obama was spying on AP and spying on James Rosen of the Fox News Channel. I'm sure they weren't. I'm sure they all got together when the libs go after a conservative talk radio or the Fox News Channel. I'm sure, being the great defenders of liberty that they are. We propose to publish an editorial on August 16th on the dangers of the administration's assault on the press and ask others to commit to publishing their own editorials on the same date, the Globe said in its pitch to fellow papers. See, it's always about them. It's always about them. They're reporting on themselves. They're writing about themselves. They're editorializing about themselves. They're victims, don't you know? They can't say what they want to say. They can't write what they... Oh, they can. Sure. I wonder what they would have thought of John Adams back in the day. John Adams and the Alien and Sedition Act. The Sedition Act, of course, applying to newspapers and others that would speak out against the government in a way that the Federalists at the time thought might undermine the budding government, the new country. We've talked about this. Thomas Jefferson and his new party ran against John Adams for, among other reasons, arguing the repeal of the Alien and Sedition Acts. They hate Jefferson, though. They hate Jefferson. They do plays on Hamilton. They hate Jefferson because Jefferson was an agrarian, because Jefferson was a states' rights guy. So they hate Jefferson. But anyway, let us continue. As of Saturday, we have more than 100 publications signed up, and I expect that number to grow in the coming days, Marjorie Pritchard, the Globe's deputy editorial page editor, told CNN. Well, that's like, Lenin talking to Trotsky. The American Society of News Editors, the New England Newspaper and Press Association, and other organizations have helped her spread the word. Well, I'll be damned. The response has been overwhelming, she said. We have some big newspapers, but the majority are from smaller markets, all enthusiastic about standing up to Trump's assault on journalism. What a bunch of quacks. Assault on journalism. More big-mouth drama queens in journalism than ever before. More unprofessional, historically illiterate mouthpieces, Democrats, progressives, call them what you want, in the media than ever before. The media has never sunk so low. They used to have a period of yellow journalism. This is the new period of yellow journalism. More like pink journalism. Instead of printing the exact same message, each publication will write its own editorial, Pritchard said. Well, why bother? Just write one and spread the word. That was a key part of her pitch. Quote, the impact of Trump's assault on journalism looks different in Boise than it does in Boston, she wrote. Well, she would know, being in Boise as often as she is. Our words will differ, but at least we can agree that such attacks are alarming. Sick. Journalists have noticed, now this is Stelter, an uptick in Trump's attacks against the news media in recent weeks. He's been using dehumanizing language like enemy of the people more often. Well, you know, Bill Maher stole a line from me, or his 400 comic writers did. Remember that, Mr. Producer? I've been calling the left the enema of the state for 15 years. Bill Maher just figured that out 2 weeks ago. He probably needed an enema. He said, wait, I got a joke. Anyway, enema of the state is what I've been calling the left all the time. So we will not call the media the enemy of the people. We will call the media the enema of the people. And if Bill Maher steals it again, we'll call him out again. He's been using these dehumanizing language like enemy of the people more often. He has also been speaking to reporters less often, limiting the chances for questions to be asked. Yeah, that's the problem. Trump doesn't talk enough to the American people through his tweets or through his spokespeople or even at these various events where he speaks. They're trying to trip him up because they know there's a criminal investigation going on, and they want Trump to say something that then Mueller can say, see that, we got him, see that? So he's being mindful of that. Notice the media, the enemy of the state, are not complaining about any of the behavior of Mr. Mueller, of the Clinton campaign, of the DNC, none of it with respect to the dossier. As a matter of fact, how many stories have CNN and MSNBC and CBS and ABC and you know, the rest of them? How many stories have they broken on the dossier? Or the involvement of the Clinton campaign in the DNC? Or the FISA court? Or Mr. Strzok? Or Ms. Page? Or Mr. McCabe? Or Mr. Comey? How many stories have they broken? Very few. And less and less and less. Right? As time goes on. All right, Stelter is like the biggest enema of the state, as far as I'm concerned. With Trump's words and not you, Don Lemon. You're an enema of the state, but he's a bigger enema of the state. All right, does that make you happy? Probably does. With Trump's words and deeds as the backdrop, some media critics have urged the White House press corps to engage in acts of solidarity. You already are, you clowns. You're all leftists. You are. Omarosa. All right. She moves from NBC to this network to that network. Stormy Daniels. By the way, aren't these so-called journalistic outlets exploiting women? Have you noticed? They're exploiting Omarosa and her defects. They've exploited Stormy Daniels and her defects. They're exploiting these women. Maxine Waters, she's out there yapping away. They exploit her. I mean, the media are exploiting these women, as far as I'm concerned. The coordinated editorials may be another example of unity across the news business. Yes, that and ideology. Although there's a long-standing debate about the effectiveness of newspaper editorials, well, for a lot of us, it's hard to tell, Stelter, what an editorial on a news page is. There is certainly strength in numbers. The greater the number of participants, the more readers will see the message. Well, not on CNN. Nobody watches CNN, you clown. Pritchard said she expects differing views from the editorials, but the same sentiment. The importance of a free and independent press. I believe in a free and independent press. you in the media believe that you should be free to be a cabal and use the press to sabotage a presidency. There is a difference, you know, a big difference. And you reveal yourselves, you're so buffoonish. The editorial pages are going to get together, ladies and gentlemen. Not use the same exact words, but the same sentiment. Now keep in mind, these are all businesses. Some of them own these papers by major corporations. They all get together to write editorials, and they talk about freedom of the press, when they're all saying the same thing. It's like Russia TV. Why do we need, here's a fair question. Why do we need CNN and MSNBC if they're going to say the same thing? Why do we need the Washington Post and the New York Times if they're going to say the same thing? I'm not saying the government should intervene. I'm a consumer. You and I, we're consumers. We get to decide what we're going to read and or listen to. But why do you need a multiplicity of newspapers if the vast majority of them say the same thing? Why do you need a multiplicity of cable channels if the vast majority of them say the same thing? You really don't. And then on top of that, you have these government outlets like NPR and PBS, which, of course, you can never get rid of because without them, we wouldn't have a free press, I guess. Now, the irony there is, of course, the government, as well as your charity, pays for it. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.